Hello, I increased the throughput on my copper sheet manifold, but stuff still happened. So what's up? I have decided that the past tense of Prince is Prunce. Prunce Andrew was arrested on his 66th birthday for bad stuff. He used to be a prince, but they stripped all of his titles, and I don't feel like calling him by his actual name, so I'm gonna call him Prunce Andrew. So yeah, we all just kind of woke up one morning, and the British government arrested a royal. That doesn't happen often. Can we do that? But no, I mean, we don't have royals. But still, Prince Andrew has been in the spotlight for a long time with regards to the Epstein stuff. Longer than most other people have been. And so I thought maybe let's do like a quick timeline about how one goes from being a decorated military royal service member to Prunce. February 19th, 1960, a Prunce is born. Oh, he's Prince at that point. It's Andrew Albert Christian Edward, as white as it gets. Yeah, he got born. He did a good job with that. 1980 to 2000, he was a Royal Navy helicopter boy. He was apparently really good at the helicopters with the Navy. Good job, guy. I don't know much about helicopters. They fly over my fucking house all day. In 1999, he met a cheeky little guy named Jeffrey Epstein. They were set up via a connection through Ghislaine Maxwell. 11 years later, in 2010, Prince Andrew was photographed with Jeffrey Epstein in New York City after Epstein's release from prison. That's the first time that Epstein was in prison. He didn't get out the second time. At least we don't know that. For basically the rest of the 2010s, he was dealing with more allegations and trying to explain why he was spotted with Epstein after Epstein was done serving his jail sentence for the whole child molestation thing. I'm running out of breath because there's too much awful boys doing awful boy things. Sorry, it's been a weird day. It's been a weird day for me. 2019 rolls around and he goes on an interview with BBC where he tries to smooth things over and explain his past and his connections with Jeffrey Epstein. And it was supposed to be a PR move to settle everything up. And that did not work. The interview went super, super bad and basically set him on the path towards where he is now. By 2025, he is a full-on Prunce. His titles have been stripped and he's barely associated with the royal family anymore. February 19th, 2026? Hey, that was recently. That's when they rolled up on his birthday, arrested him, gave us a picture of him looking crazy, and that's history, baby. At time of recording, he is not detained. He is currently out and under investigation. They are specifically charging him with an allegation that he shared government information with Jeffrey Epstein. That's I guess they got Al Capone on taxes. I have decided that the past tense of tariff is no shit, Sherlock. The United States Supreme Court has struck down Donald Trump's signature tariffs. And it's a mess. But don't take my word for it. That's a quote from Brett Kavanaugh in his dissent. He wanted to keep the tariffs because the refunds would be a mess. That's right, 175 billion US dollar dues are currently available for refund. This is not a thing that's going to happen automatically. That'd be too convenient. Let's back up. What the hell is going on? That's a good question. Sort of in general. Last year, Donald Trump had Liberation Day, where he put tariffs on basically every country in the world. Now, the Supreme Court said that the way he did that was unconstitutional and he can't put tariffs on every country in the world. And so he responded by finding another way to try to put tariffs on every country in the world. After the Supreme Court decision came out, he went and did a press conference where he was fucking mad. Anyway, he was like, oh, nah, dog, there's another law that I'm going to use that lets me put a 15% tariff on every country in the world. Notably, the thing that he wants to use has never been used before, but it also has limitations. It can only go on for 150 days until Congress would have to actually get involved and approve of the tariffs, which is the thing that Congress does. Congress controls tariffs. They're the tax ones. They do that. But Trump seems to still very strongly believe that's not the case. He also seems to still think that tariffs are how we're going to fix everything. And that's not the case either. To the best of my knowledge, this is where things stand right now. There's a big old pool of money that companies can request refunds from. We have no idea what that process will look like. This is very, very unprecedented. It will be a mess. All the while, in a couple of days, there were supposed to be more tariffs coming out where we're going to have to see what happens there with this temporary tariff thing. It really comes down to, will the Republicans ever tell Trump to fucking stop? Because beyond the fact that US citizens are the ones that are paying for the tariffs, It's not good for our trade partners who are like constantly dealing with this shit. It's a pretty great way to tell other countries like, hey, doing business with us is more effort than it's worth. All of the tariffs that Trump has been making are all built on the back of a national emergency declaration. I don't think most people even remember that. He claimed that there's a national emergency that gave him the power to put all these tariffs out. I don't think a national emergency merits setting up fanfare for a fake holiday to fulfill one of your campaign promises. I feel like a national emergency is more like, I don't know, what we're doing to Cuba. What are we doing to Cuba? We'll get to that in just one moment. I also just want to say that Trump has this week announced that the United States will be giving a $10 billion donation to his Board of Peace. That's right, the Board of Peace, which is an venture by Trump as an independent organization to contrast the UN. It also gives him total veto authority in perpetuity, even like after he's no longer the president. It's a farce. It's a fucking farce. It's a scam. Like, you have to pay $1 billion as a country to permanently join. They rescinded Canada's invitation to the Board of Peace after Mark Carney went to Davos and gave that speech where he said that, like, the US is all fucked up now. And pretty much the only countries that are on board right now are smaller authoritarian-leaning countries, lining up with the large authoritarian country. But yeah, Trump was just like, I'm going to take $10 billion from the US and give it to my organization. Because I can. Side note, he can't if we stop him. Let's talk Cuba. Cuba is currently experiencing a man-made humanitarian crisis at the hands of the United States. Obviously, the US and Cuba have a long-running and very rocky relationship, but over the past few years, we've been blockading oil into the island, and after we just randomly usurped Venezuela, we've stopped basically all oil shipments to Cuba. So right now, Cuba is operating with essentially no oil incoming. They've got a little bit of a trickle from Mexico. They've got a little tiny bit of reserves, but that's kind of it. Because of this, there are massive power outages. There's food scarcity. Basically, no education systems are currently running, and the healthcare system is on the brink of collapse. People are waiting months to get their hands on fuel. Mexico is providing humanitarian aid and food to try to help curb potential starvation. And again, all of this is just because the US, specifically the Trump administration, more specifically Marco Rubio, just wants to do this. Marco Rubio has been at the center of a lot of the US-Cuba relations for a while. He really, really loves to hate on Cuba. Marco Rubio very famously claimed that his family fled communist Cuba and ran to America, and that's what makes this country great, because he's the son of immigrants. Marco Rubio? Anyway, he really, really likes to pander to the Cuban vote in Florida. That's basically how he got to his current position. And he does it despite his family having actually left Cuba before the communists took over, like years prior. And they also even like went back to visit, just casually, just chilling. At the end of the day, essentially, Marco Rubio has staked his political career on trying to topple Cuba. He's built this whole ethos about how Cuba was so bad to his parents, and now we gotta overthrow the government because American propaganda is very, very thick. So while all of this is happening and an active humanitarian crisis is unfolding and international condemnation is rolling in, Trump has said that Cuba can end it right now by just coming to the negotiation table and making a deal. Side note, I am incredibly exhausted by the wildly rapey framing of everything that comes out of this administration. Oh, well, if they want to not starve to death, they could just take a deal, of which we set all the terms. Anyway, they basically want Cuba to come and agree to a deal that amounts to essentially regime change. That's what's going on here. They are trying to starve the Cuban populace into submission with our tax dollars through another third-party country that we invaded. Marco Rubio is also reported to be in secret talks with the grandson of Raul Castro, who is the not leader of Cuba. He's like 96 years old and technically not the leader of Cuba, but also technically still holds a lot of power. Long story short, there is an actual leader of Cuba, but the US is just going around official channels and talking directly to a sort of shadow leader, which is a really cool way to do all of this. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have full context on the entirety of the situation that happened before I was even born in Cuba. But my understanding of the current situation is that a lot of the people who fled Cuba when the communists took over were ones who were associated with the then authoritarian regime that got pushed out. And so a lot of these people who were, quote, fleeing communism were really just fleeing accountability for their actions. It would be similar to like ICE agents fleeing the US. Does that mean that every single Cuban person who's in America is an evil person? No, obviously not. But the rhetoric around like people fleeing Cuba, fleeing the communist regime that wanted to kill everyone in Cuba, that is pure American propaganda bullshit. The reality is far more understandable. There was a faction that was in control in Cuba that was supported by the US. It was very violent and it was overthrown. And the US didn't like that. And we've been mad ever since. So where we are is Cuba is facing a humanitarian crisis at the hands of the US. And I wish I had good words to share for you, but I don't. It doesn't look like it's going to be resolved particularly soon. Please tell people about this. Like, mention the ongoing crisis in Cuba at the hands of the US. Like, it's just not being discussed. And I'm not one to say that, like, mainstream media is not talking about whatever, because I'm using sources from the mainstream media to talk about this. But most people that I've chatted with, even those who are usually pretty tuned in, just seem to not know this is happening. I don't think that this story is being truly hidden, but I do think that this story is not one that people really want to focus on, especially stateside, because it's pretty cut and dry fucked up on our part. Hi, if you like what I do here and you want to support me and help me keep on doing it, I would really appreciate that. You can head to isupport.dev and find links to my Patreon, my Ko-Fi, my merch store, all sorts of stuff, different ways that you can help me out. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like, share this, follow or subscribe, whatever the action is, however you're consuming this. Let's move on. TikTok. On the clock. The European Commission would like a word with TikTok after having a word with Twitter recently. So you might recall that the EU recently slapped a fine on Twitter for doing a bunch of Twitter things. Now they're going to slap a fine on TikTok for doing TikTok things. Let's back up. Okay, what's actually going on? All right, so the EU has this like Digital Services Act that basically is like, hey, if you're going to run a social network, don't be awful. Unfortunately for Elon Musk, that's not a possibility for him. And the EU has already sent him a warning and then a fine over a bunch of bullshit that he's done. But currently, the EU is warning TikTok that a fine might happen in the future unless something changes. Essentially, they allege that TikTok is designed to be addictive, and they cite the infinite scrolling feed, the notification system, the lack of meaningful screen time management. So basically they said you have to make your app less addictive, especially for vulnerable people like minors, or we're gonna fine you up to 6% of your annual take. It remains to be seen how TikTok is going to respond, but I will say that the letter from the EU includes a few suggested remediations, one of which is to get rid of the infinite scrolling feed, which would essentially end TikTok. To be clear, that's not a requirement, that's a suggestion, but the idea of suggesting that TikTok no longer has the For You page is tantamount to saying they should just delete the app. So we'll see. Lightning round. After having just acquired them in 2021, Sony is shutting down Blue Point Games, who was known for making a bunch of really high quality remakes recently. That sucks. They're a very talented studio. Here's the weather. The US will be removing all remaining troops from Syria after having been there for over a decade. Some guy tried to rush into Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. He had a shotgun and a gas canister. He did not make it very far. And finally for today, a guy in Italy seems to have trained his dog to illegally dump trash on the side of the road so that he wouldn't get caught doing it. Now, that's impressive. It's also bad. Don't litter. And also, I feel like that would take more effort than just taking out the trash. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below where you are going to train your dog to bring trash. My name is Endeavorance. We'll talk again soon. Take care and be well.